上手Jouzu!
So, I was recently recommended these two videos by Japanese people trying to explain the grammar point n-desu. And while I appreciate what they're trying to do by elaborating on what the textbooks don't tell you, I think that both these videos are missing the core underlying structure of Japanese grammar. So, while watching these videos may allow you to understand n-desu, it may not give you an overall understanding of Japanese sentence structure. And just to be clear, I am not attacking these two individuals. In fact, I think most of what they're saying is correct. First of all, in order to use n-desu, it's actually very simple. Let's take a look at what Mr. Kaname Naito-san said.
There are basically three situations where you use this ndesu. The first one is when you are explaining something that the other person doesn't know. And the second situation you use this is when you are explaining a circumstance to clarify a situation. And the third situation where you use this is when you confess something or when you tell someone something that you have never told that person before.
はい、ありがとうございます、Kaname-san. So what he says is basically correct. However, he does not explain why n-desu does what it does. And understanding why it does what it does is going to give you a complete understanding of the entirety of Japanese grammar structure. First, let's break down what n-desu actually is, because n-desu doesn't actually exist. N is a contraction of the Japanese particle no, which we'll be talking about more later. And des is the polite form of the copula da. In order for you to understand the rest of this video, I would suggest watching my video on the copula da, as it is one of the fundamentals of Japanese structure. This is especially important if you're using Tai Kim, because Tai Kim's explanation of the copula is self-contradicting and doesn't actually make any sense. You see, putting no and da together does not change the function of either the particle or the copula, which means that the question isn't what is n-desu, but rather it is what is no and what is da. With that out of the way, we can now focus on what the n or the no is actually doing. You may know the no particle as the possessive particle, as in watashi no kaban, bag of mine, watashi no kutsu, shoes of mine, kare no saifu, wallet of his.
でも今は俺の財布だけどな。
But if you pay attention, you should realize that it doesn't really make sense with no da, and you'd be right. The solution is that the no here is not the possessive no, but instead something called the nominalizing no, which is different to the possessive no. What the nominalizing no does is that it turns the word or logical clause that it is marking into a singular noun. To learn more about why the no particle does this, click on the video on the nominal no up here. Now, that's a lot of big words there, so let's put it into an example and see what's going on. And let's use the same example that my teacher, Kure Dolly Sensei, used as well. Haha ga kuru no da. To break this down using Japanese structure, we must first identify the A car and the B car. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please refer to this video up here to understand how there are only really two types of sentences in all of Japanese. First of all, let's break it down to the original sentence here. Haha ga kuru. This is a complete logical clause that marks haha as the subject and kuru as the action. Because this sentence ends on a verb, this sentence is an A does B sentence. In this case, it means mother does come or mother come. So what happens when we add the no da? Well, first of all, the sentence ender changes to a da, which means that this is no longer an A does B sentence, but instead an A is B sentence. And this sentence is not complete unless we can attach a noun to the copula. So what is the noun? What is the B car in our sentence? Is it kuru? No, because kuru is a verb. Is it haha? No, because that's not connected to the da. The answer is that the noun is the entirety of haha ga kuru, because it is indicated by the nominalizing no. This means we treat haha ga kuru as a singular object. As in, I could call this thing a haha ga kuru. Not that it makes any sense though. Now, this also means that our sentence breakdown is still missing its final element to make it complete, and we can finally unmask it. The hidden zero da. That's right, because the entirety of haha ga kuru no da is treated as a B car, haha ga no longer serves as the A car, and we are missing the A car, which means that the full sentence is zero ga haha ga kuru no da. It is that mother come. Bam! Problem solved! Now, how is this functionally any different than just saying haha ga kuru? Well, this is exactly where we go back to the previous explanation by Kaname-san.
The first one is when you are explaining something that the other person doesn't know.
And we can see that this is true. If you walk into my room and you know that it's usually a mess, but today it's miraculously clean, I might look at your face and I know what you're thinking. Why is your room so clean? And so I can preemptively let you know, oh, it is that my mom is coming. As opposed to plainly stating, my mom is coming, which could also be interpreted as she's literally right behind you and she's coming towards you right now.
And the second situation you use this is when you are explaining a circumstance to clarify a situation.
And as you can see, we don't need to change the example at all for this to be correct. And this is precisely the advantage of understanding Japanese structure. You don't need lists of definitions because a lot of them are actually the same thing when you understand them.
And the third situation where you use this is when you confess something, or when you tell someone something that you have never told that person before.
This is also true. It's simply that the context in which you would say it is different. For example, a sentence like 会議に行かなかったのだ. As you can see, this is kind of like a confession. You thought I went to the meeting, but the fact is that I really didn't. And from this example, you can see how the previous 3 definitions of no-da are actually all one and the same.
Yabe.
There is not 3 definitions for no-da. There is no and there is da. Understand both and you'll understand Japanese structure. But there is just one more thing missing, and that's that it doesn't really do you much good if you can't remember any of it. So watch this video next to learn how to never forget anything ever again. Cheers.